Good evening, or I should say good morning, to Hannah Kathleen, who's over in Ireland. Hannah Kathleen Hawkshaw, who is Miss International Ireland 2024. Welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
What has your day been like? I've been following with interest a lot of the Miss International women who are competing, and there's so much that all of you are doing. It's a bit too much to try and keep following each one of you. So, what has your day been like? What has your week been like? How busy have you been?
Honestly, it has been very different every day. Um, I think, as you know, there's obviously a number of areas that we work on within this process on ourselves. And also, when it comes to competition preparation, there are a number of things like national costume, to our gowns, to our wardrobe, to what we want to present when it comes to our Beauties for SDGs projects, for example. So, every day has been, I suppose, a concoction of a number of activities that help towards those goals. But really, it's been, I would say, actually a really wonderful process when it comes to collaboration, because I don't believe that anything happens alone. It always takes a team to make the dream.
Mm.
And I've been very lucky to be surrounded by some wonderful people, from designers to makeup artists to hairstylists to artists, who have been helping me figure out the best way to present not only myself, hopefully, but my country at Miss International. And so that's been every day. It's been meetings with designers, it's been exercise, it's been taking care of my health, it's been being mindful about this wonderful platform that we have access to, and hopefully doing everything I can to be ready so that when I get there, I can just enjoy the process.
That sounds like a good plan. Can you give me an idea as to who's on your team? And just so for clarification, I ask this because I love Ireland, just from the Irish people that I've spoken to and
Thank you.
interviewed, and we had a big St. Patrick's Day over here. There's a large Irish contingent over here in Sydney, where I'm based, and we had a St. Patrick's Day at Darling Harbour, and there may have been some certain liquids involved. Everyone was having a good time, but I've said this about the Irish ever since. I say they are the most aggressively friendly people I've ever met. If you're not having a good time, they're going to make you have a good time, and they won't leave you alone until you're having a good time. And I say this from personal experience, or I was taken by a random stranger who made me dance and made. So that's what I love. The country is one thing, but it's the people that make the country. You know, you say it's the team that makes the dream. For me, it's the people that make the country.
Mhm.
Tell people watching who may not be so familiar with Ireland a bit about it.
Well, firstly, I love the way you expressed that, aggressively friendly. I think that actually perfectly encapsulates most Irish people.
Yeah.
Um, I think that one of the biggest things about Irish people is that there is that openness, there is that wanting to connect and wanting to make everyone feel welcome. Like, we have this philosophy that the door is always open, and there's usually always a cup of tea going, or depending on the time of day, maybe some Irish whiskey. But I'm a tea drinker myself. But I think what's interesting, actually, when it comes to it, and you kind of touched on it when it comes to the diaspora, obviously Ireland is a small country. We have approximately 5 million people living here, but there are 50 to 80 million people around the world who claim Irish heritage. And I think
Wow.
that's really fascinating when it comes to how something small can have such a large impact and a large effect. And so I'm very proud to be from Ireland. I feel very grateful to have this opportunity to now go to Miss International as the Irish representative. But I think it really just comes down to those values and how
Mm.
you welcome people, how you can bond with people. We love our, we love to have a good time here in Ireland. And so I would say that's actually the foundation of who we are.
Have you found, well, how have you found sort of the public's reaction, or even your close friends' reaction to pageantry? Because I think that's a follow on. Here in Australia, pageantry is not very well known,
Mhm.
uh, as opposed to places like America or Southeast Asia or Latin America, where if you win a big competition, you become an A-list celebrity. You can't walk down the street without, being stopped. How well known is pageantry in Ireland, and how have the public sort of reacted to you telling them your title?
I would say that it's more comparable to Australia than it would be to the
Hmm.
likes of the US or some of the big South American powerhouse countries, if you will, in the pageant world. But what I have noticed is that it's absolutely growing. And as more and more young women are sharing their experiences with pageantry, it's definitely creating that ripple effect within the community. And I think there's, from my own experience, some of my closest friends are Miss Universe Ireland, Miss World Ireland, and it's becoming, I would say, a sisterhood and a network. And that then obviously has that impact when it comes to people better understanding each woman's individual experience with it and the positives that come from it. However, I would love to see it develop more because I feel, as we've talked about a little bit before, it's such a great way to work on who you are as a human being and looking at the different areas of your life and maybe where you aspire to improve. I think if you take away the competition and you just look at the framework of how it empowers women to look at who they are, then that's a real gift. And that's something that if you take away the outcome, it's a framework that can change someone's life. So I'm very passionate about it. And what I've noticed, though, is that even people who are maybe not so familiar as they've been getting to know this process, whether it's been with me or with somebody else, in my own network, I can say that people have become very open to it. And many of them are very excited and they see the value, they see the opportunity. But it has also been very exciting to see the response of like American friends and family, and also, of course, people who I'm connected to in other parts of the world where it is a little bit bigger as a vehicle, let's say.
When you send me your bio, as I already said, it's not just extensive, it's fairly wide ranging. And so we're going to try to cover as much of it as we can. But I normally start this sort of interview by asking my guest as to how they got into pageantry to begin with, which I am going to ask you, but doubly so because I'm curious as to how it interweaves with the rest of your life. Because if you were a superhero, a superheroine, there's always an origin story. What
Sure.
made that person turn into the person they are today?
Mhm.
So I'm curious, basically, I'm asking what your superhero or your superheroine origin story is and how pageantry wove into it. Where did it weave into it? And because it's not like you were doing nothing and then pageantry found you and now suddenly you're doing everything because you did a lot before then. So your origin story and how pageantry weaves into it.
Well, I first experienced pageantry when I entered Miss Universe Ireland in 2017, I believe, which makes this a 7-year journey, you could say, which is quite significant in one's life. And it came as an opportunity that was slightly out of the blue, to be honest with you. I had met the national director at an event, and I just really resonated with everything that she shared in relation to her opinion of pageantry. And obviously, I saw how it was a way to combine a lot of the things that I was passionate about in one really nice platform, let's say. So when I entered and I had that experience, it was something that really made me look at myself in a different way, look at my life in a different way. And I met some wonderful people who I'm still friends with today. So that's how I got started. But it was probably, something that stemmed actually from just the personal passions I had had since I was a child. And when this came up, like I said, it just seemed to make sense. And then once I did that, I got the bug and I became fascinated by the whole world of pageantry and following amazing women who, to me seemed so well-rounded and so sure of themselves. And that was something that I also aspired to feel and become in my life.
And now all the other stuff. You're being too modest. You
No.
haven't mentioned all the other stuff, and I'm trying to get you to say it because I don't know where to begin. I mentioned to Hannah Kathleen before we went live, I was having a sticky beak on a website. I saw Richard Branson. I saw Bob Geldof. For those of you who don't know, I'm a huge fan of Branson, not only because of his entrepreneurial career, but because he's a huge fan of tennis, and I was a tennis coach. And then Bob Geldof because of my interest in music. But take us back. I know that your schooling took an unexpected turn, and correct me if I'm wrong because it's so dense. I might have gotten some of the details mixed up. But your
No.
schooling, let's say, took an unexpected turn, which turned to a fashion blog, I believe. And then maybe the rest is history, but take us back to then.
Yes. So, I mean, I love the way you put it, origin story. And for me, my origin story came because I was in a period where I was facing some adversity that was health related, and that meant that obviously my schooling was slightly impacted. And I always joke that when you're going through something, there's only so many books or TV shows or movies that you can immerse yourself in. And I found myself feeling, I suppose, just a little bit curious about what else I may be able to do while I was kind of on the road to recovery, let's say. And so I ended up starting a fashion blog that was very much just a personal outlet. I did not
Mm,
tell anybody except for my parents about it, and just found it as a way to, I suppose, shift my identity where I could just be the girl interested in fashion and beauty and everything that looked pretty.
mhm,
And so I started writing some of these articles. And I remember when I had my first 300 or 500 followers, some of them were in Australia and Hong Kong and the USA. And I just thought that was amazing how there were other, mostly young women that I was connected to who were passionate about the same things as I were, who were sharing these loves. And then what happened was I started to follow some young women who at the time I really admired, who were a little bit older than me and who turned this into careers. And I think that that was similar to pageantry, actually, a great way to find role models that I
mm,
connected to. And I suppose they inspired me with their passion and the similar outlets that they were interested in. But long story short, that ended up, I suppose, becoming a catalyst for me to then go into a career in marketing communications, because that fashion blog taught me skills.
yeah,
And those skills were in relation to, HTML, coding, personal branding, how you tell stories, how you create an image. And I then had people starting to approach me saying, who designed your website and who did your logo? And to be honest with you, Adrian, I started this website on blogger.com, which you may be familiar with. It's this
yeah,
very basic platform. But what happened was I was looking at these bigger bloggers like the Sartorialist and the Man Repeller, for anybody who may be interested in fashion back in the day. And I was wondering, how did they create this image and how maybe I can emulate certain things on my website? So I basically started to hack my blog and completely play with the code. And, of course, I had my obstacles, but I also was able to figure out many things. And then that contributed to people asking me, how did I design this or who did I hire? And then I ended up just saying, well, it was just myself. And so I started to help some
mm.
other people, some other business owners and actually some other fashion bloggers and things like this who were looking for some support in that regard. And I think what I realized then was that your skills, do not only apply to you, they can actually be of service to other people. And that was a big, big lesson for me, and something that ended up shaping the path that I took, and also helping me to open a world that I maybe did not expect before. But that, I think, is why I'm very passionate today about championing educational pathways, especially for young people,
Mm,
because I obviously had my own experience that with my health, I struggled to kind of fit into the box of the academic pathway at the time,
mm,
just purely because of energy levels and being able to be in class and things like this. But I was still learning and I was still very
mm.
passionate about developing myself and being in a role where I could do something. And so I think that's why now today, whether it's, academic education or music or sports, I believe that every child has something in them that can be empowering. We just have to help them find that and support them in enabling it to become a positive catalyst within their life.
I have so many questions I want to ask you about. From what did you talk to Richard Branson about, to what made you start a blog versus starting just a social media? But
You
let me start with, I think, the most important thing, which is education. Here in Australia, I have interviewed many pageant girls who are also teachers, and we've all come to basically a consensus that the education system, for want of a better phrase, could be doing better.
know,
As someone who's in IT myself, I was self-taught coding, so all that stuff that you mentioned makes a lot of sense
amazing.
to me.
Yes,
But
yes.
I have found that the education system, and I'm not going to speak for how it is in Ireland because I
Mhm.
don't know, but I have really, it's a point of frustration for me, especially now that artificial intelligence has come out, that formal education has lagged so far behind what is actually needed in the business world. And so, being able to do your taxes or being able to code, being able to start a blog, being able to start a brand, being able to put your CV together, all of that stuff to me has been stuff that has been missing from the formal education system. But more importantly than that, I think you just identified what got you through, which was your own desire to succeed, like your hunger. You said you took every opportunity to grow yourself. And I can say this, having coached tennis at an all-girls school, I was a head coach. The people
Amazing.
that I loved coaching the most, it was not the most talented ones, because very often they were just talented. They hadn't worked for it, and so they were lazy. It was the young women who were hungry, who would turn up not on time, but 5 minutes early. When you gave them advice, they would take it on board, work at it, do it, and they would come back every week hungry to learn. So I guess my question first off is, where did that come from in you? Because I think if there's any one quality that's going to determine the path your life takes, it is that internal hunger. And I'm not sure that it can be taught. So where did you get that from?
Interesting. Well, firstly, one of my favorite quotes, which I think you will also resonate with, is hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Got that?
And so I feel in my case, I always had dreams as a child, as I believe every child has. But I definitely think that through some of my experiences, I found this need maybe to prove myself. And
Mhm.
that was something that then became a little bit of a rocket behind me. Let's say, in terms of how to navigate and how to move forward in my life. So I think that was just from personal experience. But I think that, it also comes down to being able to find a path where you can, you feel like you can actually move yourself forward. And I think
Mm.
that that's the thing, we are very lucky here in Ireland to have a great education system. I've also been in places where children do not have access to education, full stop. So I think that we have to be grateful for the framework that we have that is
Mm.
there and is empowering. But I definitely feel that through some of my personal experiences, maybe I had the opportunity to develop my soft skills and my communication skills, and even being confident enough to walk into a room and to say, hello, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, this is what I can contribute. I think that's a skill that is not always necessarily emphasized in some formal
Yeah.
environments. And that's something that I believe every person, if they have that, then they can open doors that would not be possible without a conversation. And that's why through some of the let's say nonprofits and educational outlets that I work with, I'm very passionate about them, in the sense that if you can teach a child how to have confidence in themselves and how
Mm.
to, of course, have access to the resources, if they're academic and they can thrive there, fantastic. If they are musical and that's something that may be able to be an opportunity for them, great. Then they can really find that confidence. And when they have that assurance, then that can completely change the trajectory.
Yep. There's a lot to be said about the importance of education. I mean, I've already seen that you've traveled to multiple different countries. Were you just in South Africa? I can't. I
Yes,
apologize. I can't keep up with everyone. Were you just in South Africa?
was beautiful, and I've been very lucky to go there before, but it was actually just in India, and that's where I
Right.
came back from. Um, and basically, I feel very fortunate to have been able to travel to a number of different places and to witness the work of, very inspiring people to me in different environments, who are working on a range of issues, from, homelessness to kind of supporting children with special needs, to
Mm.
education, to poverty. But my experience in India, I think, has been very formative for me in understanding what I would like my next steps to look like, and also teaching me lessons that I don't think I could have learned without being on the ground and in those environments, if that makes sense. So India has become a very special place to me, in the sense that it's been a very important, I think, learning ground. And I've been lucky to have had incredible guides there who've opened their
Mm.
homes and opened their hearts to me. But that's where I experienced, I suppose you could say, significant poverty for the first time, in a
Yeah.
way that I had not experienced before. And particularly when it comes to children, that's something that I absolutely do not believe any child deserves to experience, nor needs to
Mhm.
experience, in the world that we live in. And so that was then really a a motivator for me collaborating with certain NGOs, in particular one called Lakshyan, which works
Mhm.
with women and children who, many of these children are rag pickers or street beggars. And how do you take that child into an environment where they can learn and then have access to a formal education?
Yeah.
That pathway is not as simple as many of us would wish to believe, but learning about how that is actually feasible with the right team and the right resources really inspired me and just put a fire in me, let's say, that I could talk about
Mm.
all day. So I definitely don't want to talk about it too much, but that's a real passion of mine and something that I really hope to work more on in the future.
Well, I mean, it certainly is impactful, and it's important not just to India, but children getting a good education is going to impact the entire world. I was reading a book written by several Nobel laureates, and they had come to a short list of what are the most impactful things that we could do to really make a genuine difference. And one of them was education for children in poorer countries. But let me ask you this: so you come from Ireland, I come from Australia. By any metric, we're very lucky to be living in the countries that we're living in. Not to say they
Mhm.
don't have problems, but compared to some
Oh,
other
not at all.
countries,
Not at all. Mhm.
what are some of the things that we can do tangibly to make a difference on something like that in India, where obviously the population of India, I think it's the biggest population in the world now. I think it recently surpassed China.
Mhm.
So obviously this is a large problem. What
Mhm.
are some of the things that you would encourage us to do or to find out in terms of getting involved?
Well, one of the big things that I've experienced is that a big question mark for many people when it comes to supporting charitable initiatives is trust. And
Yeah.
is the money actually going to the child? I mean, this is something that's been a major conversation. So, what I think is very important is to find an outlet that you trust. I mean, this is why for me, the NGOs that I collaborate with are ones that I know very well, and I have a good relationship with the founder, and I understand the intricacies, let's say, of how they work. So I know that if I'm sharing it with someone, I
Mm,
can be confident in knowing that if they decide to help, it's something that will go to the children. I've been with the children, I've met their families, I've experienced the impact of the work. But I would actually backtrack and say that it's not necessarily about helping someone who's halfway across the world. This was just my
yeah.
experience. I did not
Yeah.
intend for things to happen in this way. I was just lucky to have this opportunity to go to India. And when I visited this particular NGO, I went there with the intention of visiting different NGOs and experiencing different types of social issues and solutions in place to work against them, let's say.
Hmm.
Um, but this one I wasn't supposed to visit, and I met the founder the night before, and she just said to me, "Look, I know you're doing a number of things, but would you come and visit my kids?" And I said, "I'd love to." And that was the first time I went inside a slum, and it was the first time I saw children living in, significant poverty. And I witnessed many different things there. And it was that day, for some reason, something just shifted inside of me, and I just really felt I connected with these children and these teachers and their parents and their families. But what I would say is that if you know what connects to you, I love working with children. Maybe
Mm,
somebody else is passionate about mental health or working with the elderly. There is always somebody who could do with you being present with them. So I think it's really what I would just like to encourage is how everybody can be a change agent, or as I like to call it, an agent of love. And
mhm.
if you just pay attention to what you can do, then maybe it's making a donation or being present to a child in the likes of India, or it could be picking up the phone and calling your great grandparents or your grandparents, or it could be checking in on friends, or it could be saying, I'm going to volunteer at my local homeless shelter, for example. It's just about choosing to do something, because I'm a firm believer that we cannot do everything in the world. We
Yeah.
cannot change the whole world. But if we can all change one world, then that would make the world a significantly better place. And if you can
Mm,
change the trajectory, for example, of one child, I mean, I will speak about children because that's my passion, then that can change the trajectory of their entire family's life.
mm.
And then all of a sudden, you've got a much bigger ripple effect taking place that you may not even be aware of, but by you showing up, it's it can change someone's entire world. So I think That's why it's not about India, it's not about Australia, it's not about Ireland. It's about recognizing that we are all human beings. We all have a beating heart and blood pumping through our veins. And at the end of the day, we can choose to find our commonalities and uplift one another if we are just present.
Because I can tell how passionate you are about this topic. What's the impact, or what's the vision for this moving forwards? Let's say a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now, regardless of the outcome of the pageant, which we'll get to in a second, by the way. We do talk about pageantry, but where do you see this going?
So for me, what kind of came about was I found these words coming to mind for me, which are radical and love. And I feel like I experienced that the biggest act of radical love is being able to show up for someone that maybe you do not know, who may be in a different part of the world, and just choosing to stand by them and stand for them in making a change or a difference. And what I recognized was that that does not just help the person who is the beneficiary, it also actually helps the donor or the supporter or the handholder, whatever word you would like to call it, and helps you to have more empathy, more understanding. And I think it unlocks a shift in you. And so what I found kind of naturally happening was, as I started to share some of my own experiences, I had people who wanted to get more involved or wanted to know how they could help. And so that's kind of spun now into a social initiative called the Radical Love Project. And so that's something that I'm hoping to use as a vehicle where I can at least connect some of these NGOs who, as I said, I trust and I know are reliable, not just in India, but also here in Ireland and some other parts of the world as well. Hopefully it can develop further, but as a bridge between people who would like to help, but are maybe unsure how they can, and causes and people who would really value that support. So that's something that I would like to continue to develop. And that is what I stand for. So that's what I'm really, I think, grateful to the Miss International organization for having the opportunity to talk about these things that mean a lot to me, and also as every other woman also has the chance to do that. But that's what I would like to develop in the coming years post competition, because I found that that's something that at least in my case, I know I can put the energy into, and hopefully it can continue to have a tangible outcome, because being able to measure these things is also very important, I think, when it comes to kind of inspiring people to continue. And it's very empowering, I think, when you can actually recognize that it's not just a single donation or a single time you've shown up to volunteer. It's, what does that mean in someone's life? Is that 42 children put through school? Is that 30,000 liters of water brought to a village? They're significant tangibles, and that gives me goosebumps when I think about it. And I think that that's something that is very powerful.
It sounds like you found a way to take your business knowledge and your marketing knowledge and apply it to something that is not, I guess, strictly business, but still is business, but is very, very impactful. I mean, let me ask you this. How long ago did the Radical Love Project begin? Was it recently, or was it a few years ago?
I would say it really formed into this initiative last summer.
Right.
So over a year ago. But I think that the process of getting here started
Yeah,
when my personal journey began,
sure.
and kind of connecting with certain people. Again, I've said the team makes the dream. I feel also very lucky to have had a number of people come into my life who've been mentors, you could say, to me, who may have told me something or shared an anecdote that's hit home with me for whatever reason. But I think it was a combination of all of those things that really made me understand how storytelling combined with a real vehicle that people can actually participate in. Like, it's also about participation, right? It's not about just, like, I'm a firm believer, it's not about just making a donation or showing up once. It's about, how do you create an opportunity where each person can really engage and really walk a path with someone, or it could be the teacher that you have the relationship with, for example, but really understand what that growth trajectory looks like. Because that's when I think, we build relationships, and as human beings we want to build relationships, we want to connect with one another. on a deeper level. And when that happens, then naturally people
Mm,
help, and people participate, and they want to contribute in some way. Because I think when it comes to any idea that we talk about, and obviously the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are one element of what Miss International promotes, in order for us to achieve what that world might look like, it's not about one person doing something, it's about
yeah.
co-creation. So I think that's really the message. Just how can we participate and how can we co-create? And if someone wants to be a part of the change that they
Mm.
wish to see, then there are a number of incredible initiatives out there that you can get involved with.
I mean, you mentioned that when you do something like this, it's not just about the person who's receiving, but it's
Mhm,
about, in this case, yourself, the person who is doing the work, giving their time, giving their money.
mhm,
And so I asked how long ago this started, just because I wanted to lead on to the next question, which was, you've obviously achieved a lot in your short life previous to this. So doing this work, how has it transformed you? Because I have to believe that when you do something like walk into a slum where there are young children, and I think one of your stories had the figure, it's defined, I think, by the UN as living under $2 a day,
mhm.
which for anyone in a Western world would boggle the imagination. But
Mhm.
obviously, that has to have an impact on the depth of your soul. So, how have you found this work has transformed you?
To be honest with you, I think that it shifted my perspective in many ways, particularly when I actually got to, when you see a statistic or you see
Mm,
like the figure that you mentioned, less than 190 per day, sometimes it can be a struggle for us to really understand
yeah.
what that looks like, even if we have the best intention. And so, I was lucky enough, as I said, to be able to be in some environments where I could actually feel this, I could see this, I could witness it. And that really, I suppose, just gave me a newfound understanding and perspective on the matter. But I think it also made me really reflect on what the priorities are in my life and what's important to me. And I think, but a really big thing that came up was the importance of kind of connection, human connection,
Mhm.
our family, our friends, and just coming back to kind of the simpler things. Um, so it's kind of funny though when you look at something then like pageantry, which on the other side is something that some people look at as being very materialistic or very, um, you know, the
Superficial.
Yes, exactly. When really that's not the case. That's just a way to, I suppose, engage people and tell a story in another way and to showcase another side of you. But I definitely wanted to, I think, on a personal level, kind of reconnect with the place there is for all of these things in our life. And what I noticed even with the children in some of these environments was that, usually when I go there, I'm in maybe a t-shirt and a pair of jeans or something very simple. And
Yeah. Not a
then
couture gown.
no, but then there came a point where the children obviously, had become aware, through their teachers and so forth of maybe my Instagram and had seen some of these pictures and wanted to see
Yeah.
more pictures. And there was part of me that then really realized that, for example, with the children, they want to see that. So, having them try
Yeah.
on the crown and having them try on the sash, and I was
Mm.
lucky to get some businesses involved who donated some makeup and makeup brushes to me, and I was able to do a workshop with some of the teenage girls on my last trip. And I noticed the power in that, the confidence. It goes back to that initial conversation about youth empowerment and the confidence it instills and the possibility I think also it instills. And, you know, it's about how do you unlock dreams and empower those dreams. And that's not to say that
Mm.
every single person will go off and live that dream necessarily that they aspire to, but if one does, if two do, that can change a village, that can change a community, and that then again has that ripple effect. But I think that it definitely impacted me deeply. It completely shifted certain things that I was working on and what I wanted to continue to work to in my future. And I think it's helped me now maybe understand kind of what the purpose of some things in my life have been for, and to understand maybe how I can take certain skills or certain experiences that I've had to now contribute that to developing something that I hope will be very meaningful.
Absolutely. When people ask me how I got involved in pageantry to begin
I'm
with,
so curious.
I I won't bore you with the whole story now. I've
I
told it before. I can tell you. I
Adrian.
can tell you after. But I'm just curious because I remember when this started for me, which was I was coaching tennis at an all-girls school, and I had a young girl that I was coaching. I still remember her name, and I looked down at her forearm, and I saw parallel cuts, parallel scars across her forearm, and I didn't ask about it because I knew, better than that to ask a young girl in front of everyone, why are those cuts on your arm? Turned out that she had been ritualistically cutting herself. Now, this was in the early days when mental health awareness, at least here in Australia, was very, very formative years. So people didn't talk about it. It was really kind of a shameful thing. But I remember seeing that, and my brain immediately went to, well, what can I do about this? How can I help? Not just specifically her, but obviously there's an issue here. What can I do about it? And that started this whole journey for me of interviewing women in particular, because my brain went, well, the best person to help that young woman in trouble is not me as a man, but other women who are doing inspiring things. And by the way, I said, I don't want to interview celebrities because I think very often we can get sort of misguided by fame and fortune. So I wanted real women who were doing amazing things. And then, 7 years later, same as you with your pageant career, you know, here I am and I've done hundreds of these interviews. But my point is, I remember what it felt like when I looked down and saw those cuts, and then not just the cuts, but what it meant. And then that triggered the whole journey. I'm just curious for yourself, given your recent trip to India or maybe somewhere else, did you have any of those moments where you just went, now there's something I need to do? Like, I know what I'm here to do. Did you have any of those moments?
I think I've had a number of those moments, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
India brought some of those moments to me. I've also had the chance to work with an amazing charity that does work in a number of countries, but I visited some special projects that they'd funded in Cyprus, actually.
Oh,
And
wow.
there I got to spend some time with amazing children who were struggling with different needs, from, visual impairment and blindness to other special needs. And I think what I realized in these different environments, but particularly here with these children, there was some maybe concern from a sensory perspective about how they would respond to my sash and crown that I brought with
Hmm.
me at the time. And obviously I'm very happy to go into these environments without that, but I've also recognized the number one, the platform it gives you, and two, the joy it can bring to many children. And what I found, and what the people that I was with, the amazing team that I was with, also found, was that they loved it. They really responded. And I think for me that was also an example of how, you know I think intention and the space that you create is very important, and kind of the way in which you approach something, whether it's a child, whether it's an adult, whatever social
Mm.
issue. But it was experiences like these. I mean, I could go on, as I'm sure you've also had many more, that maybe just gave me different pieces of that puzzle. Um, but the common thread with all of these environments, whether it's been Cyprus, India, Ireland, or otherwise, has actually been music as a way to communicate. Because obviously,
Mm.
whether it's a challenge in communication, or a language barrier, or even a religious barrier, you could say, I've noticed that going in and singing, and in return, actually a lot of the time, having either music or song or dance shared back to me, it's been a way to have that universal language of understanding that you just get, right? I'm sure you've also listened to songs in different language that
Mm.
didn't understand
Yep.
lyrically, but you just understood. And so that was something that through all of these experiences came out as a very clear medium for me to hopefully now use as a tool for that connection, and to share some of these stories in a way that I think everyone can engage with, because a song is just a song, or a video is
Well,
just
let's get into music because this is another area of fascination for me. As I said, I was studying music business management, and so I was
Yes,
supposed
that's
to
incredible.
find talented singers and bands and sign them up. So I know all this stuff about fees and all this legal stuff. And then
Mhm.
I played the violin, not so much now, but I started at the age of 2, so
You've
classically
also lived
trained.
many lives.
Yeah, and I dug back because I was so fascinated by the amount of what you did, and I dug back, and I don't know if it's on your social media, but I found a clip of you performing, Now, was it the Cranberries? Was it Dreams?
Oh.
Right? Now
Well,
it was so weird because that song I had just been listening to. Now, it's an old song, and it's not like it's the first time I heard it, but I just was listening it to like the first time, like for the first time with new ears, because it's such a lovely song. And to your point, there are songs in other languages where I don't understand the words, but you get the emotion behind it. And then I heard you sing and I went, wow, she actually, I don't want to sound terrible, she actually can sing. Because sometimes I'm told that people can sing and I'm like, oh, just because of my upbringing, I'm like, yeah, that's good. But wow, she really can sing, because that's not an easy song to perform. And then, obviously you have a new song coming out, which I'll let you talk about. It's not out yet. And then I heard that you shared it with me. I was fortunate enough to listen to that. And again, your voice it's kind of, I'm not out of this, well, kind of out of this world, but you have this control over it. And this most recent song, I mean, we talked about it a bit before we went live. It seems raw in the best way, very authentic, very uplifting in a way that perhaps your previous songs, which you said you also wrote, maybe were not as connected to the essence of who you were. But how did you get involved with all this songwriting? Sorry for all the preamble, but I get very excited about music, and I don't get to talk about it that often. But
well, I'm happy to share this with you.
how did the singing songwriting journey start? Because those, by the way, they're also two separate ones, because not everyone who can sing can write, and not everyone who can write can sing. You can do both. So tell me more. Another origin story, if you would.
Other origin story. Well, I've been singing as long as I can remember. My parents and my sister can definitely share that I invited them to a show or two in the living room as an
Right.
enthusiastic child. I remember one time I was recording some sort of tape for I think it was some children's, engagement initiative by one of these radio stations or TV shows. And I remember being in the living room and recording my song, and my best friend was there and my sister, and I was saying, please be quiet, I need to focus, just very funny little childlike things. But it's always been, I think, a big part of who I am and how I communicate. I love the arts. Something that helped me a lot, I think, as a child to, come outside of my comfort zone and to build confidence. I was always participating in local productions and doing whatever I could. But as I grew, then I started to become interested in, I think, writing my own songs. I wrote my first song when I was 11, or at least the bones of it, you could say. And I just remember that vividly, because a family friend was the person who I was kind of sparring with to see what they thought of it.
Right.
And then, basically that just became a big personal outlet, I think, and something that I was always passionate about. And also when I was struggling with some adversities, as we all face in life, music was a big healer for me, and something that I could look to express myself and to maybe deal with some of those things. But now I feel very excited because I've kind of been on my own personal journey, I suppose, as an artist, as I think many people experience. And I think that question of identity was a big one for me. And that's something that, whether or not you're musical, is a question that most of us face. Who
Yeah.
am I? What is the real person, let's say, within, and not the person influenced by these external factors. And so I think when it comes to especially young people who have these constant reminders on social media and these constant question marks coming up, it's how do you really learn to embrace who you are? And I think that that's why Sunrise, which is my upcoming song, feels very
Yeah.
authentic to me, because I think that that's a real expression of who I am, and a story that I'm passionate about. And maybe some of these other songs, even though, I had a wonderful time making them and writing them, and hopefully some people have enjoyed them, I think that they, or at least when I was maybe in the process of presenting with them, that perhaps I didn't necessarily truly understand who I was and what I wish to do. And I think it's always a continuous journey. You never at your destination. It's just something that I think you become more aware of, really what's within and how you can then translate that. And so now I'm excited to use music with more intention, and hopefully as a tool to connect people and to shine a light on some of these social initiatives that I'm passionate about through the medium of visual storytelling and
Yeah.
music. So that's the next chapter, let's say, that's coming very soon, and something that I hope can actually help the Radical Love Project as a musical component, let's say, just to kind of share
Mm.
that message of how can you be an agent of change without there being any pressure that you have to take this step or you have to do this,
Yeah.
but just to kind of create and continue that conversation and hopefully engage some people in the process.
The musical nerd in me just needs to ask, what's your songwriting process? Because I've
Yeah.
interviewed other girls who are singer-songwriters, and one of the recurring themes is they keep their phone around or notebooks, and when a lyric comes into their head, they're jotting it down, or a tune comes into their head, they sing it into their phone. I've
Yeah.
never written a song. I tried probably when I was 11 too. It would never see the light of day. It was terrible. I don't have that talent. But what's your songwriting process? How do you get to that finished product?
Well, I can definitely connect with the other ladies. I think having your
Okay.
phone by, and sometimes you might sound a little bit crazy to somebody who doesn't understand what you're trying to do, because sometimes there may not be a lyric, there might just be a melody, or there
Yep.
might just be some sort of basic idea. But usually putting it down in a recorded format is helpful. But to me, honestly, it kind of depends. Sometimes I collaborate with musicians or other artists who might have the foundation of something, like the songs that you would have heard from before were made in that
Mhm.
sense. Um, a song like Sunrise, I originally wrote just piano and vocal, very simple. And then I was able to work with an amazing producer who helped me to develop it. But some other more recent ones that I'm also working on and hoping to share after Sunrise have kind of stemmed from different, concepts that I've maybe been experiencing and learning about, and kind of, came from that idea. So it was more about
Right.
a general idea, and then sitting down and thinking, how can I share this idea and share this story rather than it being a random melody, for example. So I think it really just depends. You have the canvas and then you start painting, and sometimes it works. And sometimes you might think, I'll revisit that later and continue with something else, So I think it's just expression. I think all of these things are just, how can you express yourself? And that's also why I think sometimes if we can shift a little bit away from the maybe commercial aspect of anything, it doesn't have to be
Mm.
music, more about what's really true to us. I think we're also living in a time now where social media and everything has really influenced people to have a desire for authenticity, and you can see that people can see right through you if you're being authentic or inauthentic. And so I think that now kind of championing that authenticity and that kind of expression in a way that's really true to who you are is something that people respond to, and it also creates a ripple effect with the next generation as well. So that's my process anyway, in a long-winded manner.
Is there a live concert coming sometime soon? Perhaps a pared back acoustic version?
Well, I would actually really love to do an acoustic version, just guitar and vocal. So let's see. If I have time, if I can make it happen before Miss International, that would be wonderful. If not, definitely after. But I would love to find more ways to perform, whether it's in Ireland or other places, because I think there's nothing like that adrenaline that you experience. I mean, pageantry is a similar sense. Like, you also feel that adrenaline when you can feel everyone's energy and everyone's passion,
Mm.
everyone's excitement, and that's something that I think is a real gift to experience.
I wanted to just quickly ask you, as I mentioned, I was stalking your website and saw a few famous faces. I won't get you to go through each one of them, but I'm curious, when you hang around someone like Sir Richard Branson, or is it Sir Bob Geldof? Is he a Sir as well? He's a
Yes.
Sir too. When you hang around people like that, I'm just curious, have there been any nuggets of wisdom or any things that they've said to you and you just went, I've never thought of it that way, and like that's why they are who they are, and
Mhm.
why perhaps there's a lot of people who are not as successful or well known as they are. Just curious, any particular nuggets of wisdom that really stuck with you?
Definitely. I also think success is relative. Like,
Mm.
success can like sometimes we say, oh, success looks like becoming the top business person, for example. But
Yeah.
success can also be, you know, finding your ideal partner and establishing a beautiful family together. It can be
Mm.
setting your own creative business. It can be pursuing academics. It could be becoming a doctor. You know, everybody has a different vision and a different dream. But one of the things that I really, really learned in particular from Richard Branson was the idea to think out of this world, or to think outside of the box.
Mm.
And that particularly hit home with me because the first opportunity I had to meet him was actually the week that Virgin Galactic was launching its
Oh,
first rocket
wow.
to space. So it was
Yeah.
literally an out of this world
Yeah.
concept. And I think for me, it just made me think about how so many of us hold ourselves back because we may think that an idea is inconceivable. But
Mm.
actually, more is possible than we realize. And I think a lot of the time, these inconceivable ideas that we have are actually ideas that somebody else may have done before us. So it's validated that it is possible. We just have to, I think, first realize that it may be a possibility for us as well, and then be bold enough to take that first step. And an example could be the likes of, you know, competing in Miss International, or putting yourself
Mm.
forward for a national sports team, or going for an audition that you maybe didn't consider, or being bold enough to start your own business. You know, it can look very different to each person, but I think that was something that just really, really hit home with me. And another
Yeah.
thing was how when you find your ikigai, as they say in Japan, you know, when you find your
I love
purpose,
that. Yeah.
of all of those things that can come together and help you harness what you can do. That's another thing I've noticed in a lot of these different environments that I've been lucky to be in, and from some of these people who I feel very grateful to have been able to learn from, in
Mm.
that sense, is that, you know, when you find that, which I think I was actually envious at times of, or not envious, but kind of sat there thinking, well, you know, I don't know
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
people are inventing some of these incredible things and contributing in such big ways. You know, what am I doing here? What am I supposed to do? And that question has also been a big one for me. And I think that when you can spend some time, or you just let it happen naturally, but you're conscious about what is my ikigai, what is my purpose, then when you find that, I think that that's when you can really amplify everything, and you can have this, you know, fire, let's say, behind you that
Mm.
just pushes things forward in a different way, and it shifts the intention behind everything. So they would be two of the big lessons I think I've learned.
It's interesting. I've been in and around the business circle for a long time and been around some amazing entrepreneurs. And
Mhm.
I have to say that that out of everything I've heard, the concept of ikigai to me is probably the most central and basic thing you should always come back to, is finding that
Yes.
intersection. I loved
Mhm.
it so much. I have a post about it on my social media, like an animated diagram showing showing people what ikigai is, because I think it's not just fundamental to business, it's fundamental to finding fulfillment in life, which is more important than achieving a certain level of financial success. It's finding what makes you tick. But just a random but related question: how was Sir Richard's tennis?
Actually, very good. I had the
Yeah.
opportunity to be his doubles partner, actually.
Okay. No
Um,
pressure.
say that we won the match. I know, no pressure, right? But no, very good. And I think, you know, I think like, look, it's actually a great depiction of everything that we've kind of talked about coming together. You know, that, you know, tennis, for example, as a vehicle for connection and being healthy, and playing sports and coming together. It's always
Mm.
about that foundation of how can you just find those commonalities, and how can you, I don't know, I feel like kind of what we're alluding to with all of these different pockets, actually life comes together, and all of these different
It
vehicles share
does.
the same
Yeah.
values. Does that make sense? And I think that's really fascinating. But he was very, you know, my experience was that he was very kind, and as I said, I learned a lot of important lessons, and I'm very grateful for that. But it was certainly a moment when I thought to myself, you know, kind of, what am I doing here? Because I was surrounded by a lot of entrepreneurs. I was quite young at the time, and I found myself, you know, very inspired, but also probably hungrier for more clarity
Yeah.
about what my path might look like. But that also, I think, is an important reminder about patience. And we are
Mm.
all on our own timeline. And we have to respect that and to be patient and to be, I think, mindful every day about becoming the best version of ourselves, however we can, but recognizing that the answers will come. I think the one thing that I really learned is just how can you focus on becoming her or becoming him? And so this
Mm,
concept of what is the version of ourself that has these things or maybe is able to give these things that we wish to give in our lifetime or to the world. And usually there are certain habits or certain things that you need to do to get yourself to that point. And so that's something that I think can also help you to find your path, find your trajectory.
mm. Can I ask, perchance, do you remember who you beat on the other side? I mean, you said you won the match. Who was on the other side?
Oh goodness me, that's a good question. I have some photos somewhere, but basically, I was it was definitely entrepreneurs though. People who were doing amazing things. I believe one of them may have been in the health field, and I think another
Right,
one of them may have been in the education space. But
right.
I was honestly just so focused on making sure I didn't miss a shot myself that I didn't want to let the side down.
I would say the bigger concern in doubles is not hitting Sir Richard in the head with your serve,
Yes,
because that does happen. You don't want
that
to
was
do
not
that.
a good look.
No, you probably wouldn't be invited back ever. But just before I ask you about Miss International itself, which I promise I will get to, coming up to about an hour, I finally get into pageants. But just before that, on the subject of tennis, your
Mm,
sister is a
yes,
professional tennis player. Now, I'm a tennis nut. I've
I
not heard
know.
much about Irish tennis players. I know everything about tennis. I was a coach. I used to string my own rackets. I customized my own rackets. And so here you are achieving all this. And then your sister is a professional tennis player. So I guess the first unrelated question is, what happened to the, what's happening with your family where both of you are achieving so much in fields that, let's say, are not so well known. For example, in business, there are a lot. It's predominantly still men,
Mhm.
and the professional tennis circuit, there are not a lot of famous Irish tennis players. So, How did this happen? That you two are achieving great things in fields that probably no one would have thought you were destined for.
Well, good question. My sister is very much focused on her endeavors. I mean, she has an incredible work ethic that I really admire. And obviously, as you know very well, the sporting path and in particular tennis is not easy. It
Mm,
can be quite lonely, especially when
yeah,
you start competing yourself, and it can be very challenging physically, mentally. There are a whole host of things that go into it. But she has been very passionate about tennis from a very young age. We actually both used to play tennis when we were young, and then I ended up taking a break when my adversities came along, and I started to
of course.
pursue the other avenues when it came to my fashion blog and things like that. But she kept going with it, and she's extremely talented. And I think that what's been very interesting though is how we've both actually reached a point this year where we're both representing Ireland in
Mm,
respective
yep,
endeavors. And she recently played in Moldova representing Ireland at the Billie Jean King Cup, which is
I
obviously,
saw that. Yeah,
you will understand what that
yeah.
is. People who may not be into tennis may not know, but that's a significant gathering of other international teams who come together. And obviously Billie Jean King was very, very significant for women's tennis. And
Yeah.
so it's really exciting now to have her had that experience, and now also to for me to be able to go to Japan and kind of share that same, I suppose, honor of representing your country in the same year as well.
Yeah.
So she's amazing, and she's also working very hard, and it's an exciting pathway for her. So we will see what happens, but I think that she's, obviously I'm biased, I'm her cheerleader, I'd like to think so. So I'm very proud of her.
Who's the older sibling, just out of interest?
I am the oldest, so she's my
Right.
younger sister. Yeah.
Okay. So if you two were to have a tennis rematch now, you'd still be able to beat
Oh,
her, right? Because you're the older
so
sibling.
I would be annihilated on the tennis court, to be honest with you. But look, I think tennis, I think music, I think all of these things, of course they can have the competitive element, but at the end of the day, it's just a great way to come together and to, I think, especially in relation to tennis, it's so healthy. It takes you outdoors if the
Mm,
weather is nice, and it's also you know, mentally challenging, but really fun. And I think that's also something that's influenced me actually in a sense in the way that, obviously education, music, but also
Mm,
sports. I think all of
yeah.
these different mediums can be really powerful vehicles to enable a young person to facilitate opportunity that they may not have otherwise. And even so many young people I know who've been able to go and get like a university scholarship through sports or
Mm,
otherwise. And that's something that, over and above maybe becoming a professional tennis player or a professional musician, it can open doors for you to access things that you may not have been able to access otherwise. And that's really incredible and very inspiring.
yeah, there was a study that came out recently about how different sports can either add or subtract from the average life expectancy.
Oh,
And tennis and racket sports in general came out on top. I think on average it was like it adds 15 years to your life, specifically because of the way it works your brain. So of course I was very happy to hear that. I mean, your sister probably will be, and you as a tennis player. Uh, just final question on that note: who would do better? You on the I know you're not identical twins, but if you swapped places, trading places for a week, who would
okay.
do better? You on the professional tennis circuit or your sister on the professional pageant circuit?
Oh my goodness, so interesting. Oh, I I feel that we very much found our lanes and we're both very passionate about what we do, but I also think
Okay.
that if she ever decided to go for a beauty pageant that she would do wonderfully in it because she, again, it comes back to who you are and do you know your
Yeah.
values, do you know what you stand for, and do you know what you would like to represent. So I think it's a funny one. Who knows what the future holds for her? Um, but I think that at least right now we've definitely found our lanes and definitely found what we are both passionate about. And, you know,
Yeah.
please God, it will all unfold positively.
You have a pageant coming up. So I guess the first question, if we're getting into it finally, an hour in, when are you leaving?
So I will be leaving on October 28th is the plan.
Huh?
And then most of us will be arriving on October 29th. So not long to go. We have officially entered the month of October and now it's
Mm.
crunch time.
And what's your month of October leading up to, leaving on the 28th? What's your schedule looking like, dare I ask?
Yes, no. So it's again, like I shared at the beginning, it's kind of a mix of a number of things, but um some that I am, obviously very excited about are things like my national costume. That
Right.
design process is well and truly underway. So I have a number of fittings for that, and obviously being able to see a concept go from a sketch to a reality is really exciting, as well as gowns and then on the other hand, there's obviously things like ramp practice and Q&A practice and just I think just being in touch with hopefully who I am and what I would love to bring to the table when it comes to conversation and showcasing, I suppose, what's important to me because we do, you know, really need to think about, I suppose, who we are. And again, not just representing ourselves, but representing our country and our people and being able to showcase that diversity. So when it comes to things like wardrobe and national costume and gown, I'm trying to find ways to incorporate things that I feel represent Ireland or are an
Mm.
homage to my people and our culture. And then of course I have some things that are musical related that I will be sharing soon, as you know. So there's kind of a number of different things, but we have to prepare a significant amount. And I think that also of course it's a competition, but I think that it's also a beautiful experience. There are 75 women from around the world coming together to share their cultures and to share their passions. And I think that if the preparation is done well in advance, then hopefully once we get there, we can just really be present and have a wonderful experience as well
Yeah.
as being able to put our best foot forward, because at the end of the day only one woman can walk away with
Mm.
the title, let's say, but we can each leave with a renewed sense of growth and personal understanding. And that's also one of the reasons that I love the theme of the pageant this year, which is sustainability in pageantry and what that looks like, especially when it comes to mental health and, kind of good competition and being
Yeah.
able to have that sense of self growth and understanding as opposed to the path ending once we leave Japan.
So, I mean, you touched on a couple of things there, and there's obviously representing yourself. So, I mean, given the wide-ranging conversation that we've already had, I have to assume it'd be quite a challenge when someone says, "So, what do you do?" It's not
Oh,
like you just have, the 9 to 5. No disrespect, and I know many entrepreneurs have a similar issue when asked, "What do they do?" It's like, well, where do I begin? But then also when you're representing your country, and I have to imagine that means a lot to you. It's like, well, how do I do that as well, particularly through national costume, probably the biggest one, but then also down to your wardrobe. Are you working with like local Irish people, and can you represent local Irish businesses, designers, all that sort of thing? So, can you walk us through maybe some of that process, both from yourself in terms of how do I represent myself, but then also how do I represent this amazing country of mine?
sure. So when it comes to self-representation, I think that you made a very valid point in relation to how one presents themselves. And I think,
Mm,
though, to be honest with you, that whatever your occupation is or whatever it is that you do, that is not who you are. That's just one element of your maybe professional identity.
yeah.
And so what I've found is, the backbone of what I've done kind of entrepreneurially, let's say in a work sense, has been consulting in the communication space. Through that I had the opportunity to take on a leadership position in a health clinic group, which I did during COVID, which was an amazing experience. And I've also had
Wow.
the chance to work with a wonderful nonprofit in the US that's focused on performing arts education. So, the common thread for me has been branding and marketing. Let's say that's been the foundation of everything that I've done. But obviously, I think that there's also many other pockets to who I am. And so now I feel that what's helped me a lot is I think I've found that the red thread, let's say for me, is
Yeah.
music is one of them. Storytelling, you could say. Um, if we very much simplify it, it's storytelling across the board. And also the the desire to kind of focus more on social entrepreneurship moving forward. So I think that's kind of in a nutshell what I am hoping to portray on my personal front.
Hmm.
Um, as well, of course, things like modeling. I have a wonderful agency here in Ireland, and I very much enjoy that work as well, which is it's a great vehicle too. But kind of then tapping into the side of Ireland, what I found is, at least when it comes to how I'm presenting in Miss International, one of the themes, let's say, of my presentation is actually storytelling and kind of
Mm,
the folklore that I think makes Ireland so special, because we are very much a Celtic, in certain senses, mythical um, country, and we have some wonderful stories that have really made us fascinating, I think, to certain parts of the world, and stories that I've also been interested in kind of learning more about since I've been going through
mm,
this process and thinking about what elements do I want to represent, and that storytelling is something that has touched the world in many senses. We have some wonderful creative writers who have been very significant in the global landscape, like Oscar
yeah,
Wilde, and we have
of
some
course. Yeah.
incredible musicians. You mentioned the Cranberries, for example, or
Mm,
Bob Geldof, people who've really made an impact on a global level. And so I think that the Irish people and the Irish value has very much been rooted in sharing stories with one another. And so that's how I'm hoping, I suppose, to connect my personal passions and personal experiences with the representation of my country in a way that is authentic and real to me. And
mm,
I've been very lucky to be able to continue my relationships with many people who've kind of been working with me on this process since the beginning. So, one of the amazing designers who is working on a very special gown for me is House of Kerry. Christine is the founder of House of Kerry, and she's based in Southern Ireland. And I've actually worked with her since the beginning of my Miss Ireland process. She made me some
right.
beautiful gowns during the national competition. And now I feel very grateful to be able to take her brand with me to Japan. And
Mm,
obviously, we have the chance to showcase some national pieces. And, she makes these beautiful, like, we first started working together actually because of her beautiful silk scarves. And I
mhm.
have to play this because I think you'll appreciate it. One of the scarves in particular, the first one I received, actually has cows on it. And if somebody had said to me maybe 5 years ago, you're going to love this silk scarf that has cows on it, I would have said, I'm not so sure about that. But basically, they have beautiful depictions of Ireland on these silk scarves in ways that are so stunning and elegant and just
Mm.
beautiful celebration of color and quality craftsmanship. And so it's like, she's been someone who I've really appreciated her brand, not just in the gown sense, but also in her other pieces. And so I
Yeah.
feel very excited to kind of continue that relationship and to be able to showcase a wonderful Irish designer who values sustainability and quality craft, et cetera, et cetera. But then I also have some other amazing brands, like, there's an incredible store here in Dublin called Angelo Bridal, who've also been with me throughout this whole process. And they have some beautiful gowns from international designers, but obviously they're based here in Dublin, and they've
Yeah.
been so generous to, help me with gowns for photo shoots or to help me with gowns for events. And so I'm also going to be bringing them with me to Japan, and a number of other people as well. But really, it just comes back to, I think it's a community effort. And I've also been,
Yeah.
very, very touched by everybody's willingness to be a part of this journey with me, because it's not about yourself, it's about your country. And it's just, how do you be the best representative that you can be
Mm.
to represent your country in the best way possible? At least that's my
Have you
opinion.
I think that opinion is very valid and accurate. Have you figured out how you're going to pack all of this? It sounds like there's quite a lot of stuff incoming. How many suitcases are we taking?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not sure. But one thing that I did appreciate actually about how Miss International kind of encourage all of us to participate is that they, it seems to be kind of like a very um, reasonable understanding of how we should show up, and we
Mm.
all have an even playing field in terms of, hair and makeup and, support that we have there, and chaperones and things like this. So I think it's definitely about not overpacking. It's about being sensible, of course, making sure we have everything that we need. But I've certainly learned a thing or two from my friends, for example, at Angelo Bridal, about how to pack dresses in an effective way,
Yeah.
things like this. But I'm definitely, kind of conscious about making sure that I have everything I need, from earrings to shoes, in a way that's organized, so that hopefully
Yeah.
when I get there and we all get settled, it can be very straightforward. So it takes the guessing out of it, right? And just goes back to, how can we enjoy the experience fully and be present in that experience. Oh, goodness me, sorry, I thought that was on
You're
silent.
busy.
It's actually, this funny thing that I do, my it was an alarm. Sometimes I set alarms, set reminders, and it drives me crazy, because obviously it sometimes will go off. But I just do this to remind myself of important things that need to be done, and it's caught me now unexpectedly. So I do apologize.
That's okay. I hope it wasn't a reminder to jump on this interview, because
I know,
nothing like getting a reminder to be doing something you're already doing, right?
I know, right? Well, better safe than sorry, I suppose you could say.
That's true. How much have you been looking into Japan and its people, its culture, its customs, its language, its food?
I think that Japan, I've been very lucky to meet some wonderful, wonderful people from Japan. And what I noticed was how kind they are, how gracious they are. I think that's probably been the biggest thing. I think they have a very beautiful way of being with
Mm.
other people. So I'm doing everything that I can to learn more about the culture and the customs, and the even the little bits and pieces. I won't embarrass myself now and say something in case I mispronounce it, but
Okay.
um, no, it's I think that the biggest thing for me is just taking the chance to actually learn about another culture. It's
Yeah.
I think the best way, though, that you can really experience it is in person. So I'm just really excited to have that chance to immerse myself. And I think, what better way to experience Japan than in this way, organized by Miss International, with all of the wonderful excursions that we have the opportunity to have, and the immersions that we have the chance to experience. So I'm very excited. But I think probably for me, the biggest thing that stood out when it comes to the Japanese way of being has been ikigai, which we've
Mhm.
obviously talked
Yeah.
about. I think that that's something that is very universal and can influence everybody positively wherever you come from. So that's something that I'm hoping to even learn more about, and also to champion, if I can, as a way for, better understanding of oneself and how to move forward in a positive way.
Have you had a chance to interact or have chats with any of the other fellow women who will be going over to Japan with you?
I have. We actually all have a group chat now on WhatsApp, so everybody is connected. But it's been so nice to connect. Of course, there are so many of us, so I don't think everybody necessarily had the chance to have very deep conversations with every person as of yet. But there have been a few of the girls in particular that I've been able to share some WhatsApp chats with back and forth and some voice messages. And it's nice to feel everyone's excitement and to feel
Mm,
the kind of common questions that everyone has, like, small things that some of us are wondering, and it's kind of echoed then in the group chat, for example. But I'm very excited. I think that this is a way to bring together women who have a lot of the same passions and a lot of the same
mm,
in common, and that's obviously a really nice foundation, I think, to build friendships. And I'm quite sure that we will walk away with friendships that will last, hopefully, our lifetimes, because of the fact that there are so many things in common that we can celebrate about one another. And hopefully we can
yeah,
also share some trips, who knows, later to each other's countries and actually experience said cultures
yeah.
in another way.
Do you think there'll be any, I was going to say linguistic adventures, but when I say linguistic adventures, I mean accents. Do you think there'll be any accental confusion, not accidental confusion, but between all the different accents that will be there, I don't know, will everyone be able to understand everyone else?
I think that's a great question. And, I will let you know when I
Okay.
am there and once I've had the experience. But I think everyone's been kind of making an effort to like hear each other. Like obviously everybody
Yeah.
is posting videos and some of us are sending
Yeah.
voice notes. So I think we're all becoming more conscious of everybody's way of communicating, at least those that have been elected. Um,
Mm.
so I think, time will tell, but I believe that the secret ingredient will be to speak slowly.
Hmm.
Otherwise, we will all get lost because I know, even for example, the Irish accent also, when you start speaking quickly and you're enthusiastic, which sometimes I can be, it can sound like a song is taking place and people are confused. So I think it's very important that we are all intentional and just focus on clear communication.
We'll move to the end in a sec, but I have to say, out of all the different countries who that I've interviewed with, I never had an issue with the Irish accent. The one that a lot of people seem to have struggles with was the Scottish accent.
Yes.
And I never struggled with it until I was actually over in the UK for a pageant. And there's this quite well-known pageant photographer. He's Scottish, and
Okay.
he's from Glasgow.
Oh,
And he
yeah.
saw me, and he points to me, and he starts saying words, and I kid you not, I was very jet lagged, but I couldn't understand a word that was coming out of his mouth. I thought I was having an aneurysm or a stroke
Oh, no.
because he was speaking to me and gesticulating very quickly. I didn't understand a single word that he said, and I felt really bad. I kind of pieced it together from his giant camera and him pointing, so I got my photo taken. But then afterwards, I asked my Glaswegian friend, so I couldn't understand a word he said, and she goes, "Oh yeah, I can't understand either." I'm like, if you're from Glasgow and you can't understand him, how am I supposed to understand him? So I will say, speaking slowly
Yeah.
is very helpful.
Yes, I believe so. I mean, the Dublin accent is, I think, generally quite clear, but some other parts of the country, I have friends who've visited and they have just been completely puzzled by what people are saying. But I think, like you say, speaking slowly and taking our time will hopefully help
Yeah.
us all when we're in Japan anyway to be understood by one another.
Yeah, I agree.
Mm.
All right. Well, Hannah Kathleen, just before we get to the final 10 questions, is there anyone that you would like to give a shout out to? You have mentioned some of them already, but here's your chance.
Honestly, I would just say my family. I think that this has been such a, you know, adventure of a process, and being able
Yeah.
to have their support and also their understanding, even when sometimes, there are pivots and things happen quickly and it can be quite the adventure. It's
Yeah.
been very meaningful to me. So just my family, my sisters, my best friend, she's obviously been a very integral part of my process as well. But I think they've just been anchors for me, let's say. So thank you to my family.
Perfect. Are any of them going to make it over to Japan?
Hopefully, we're still confirming a couple of things, but I hope that my mum will be coming at least.
Okay.
So hopefully, her and one of her closest friends who's known me since I was a child. So if that happens, that would be amazing. And we'll see if anyone else can make it over. But obviously, it's quite a significant trip, so
Of
um,
course.
we will see. But I think that it will be very special. And obviously, one of the things that's great is that Miss International does live stream. So there will be viewing
Mm,
parties, if not.
perfect. All right. Let's get to these final 10 questions then. Number one, what is your favorite word?
Well, what's coming to me right now is spectacular. So I'm just going to embrace that. Like, how do we have a spectacular, sparkly, wonderful existence?
I don't think I've heard that answer. I've heard fabulous a lot.
Oh, okay.
Spectacular. I think that's the first. Number two, what is your least favorite word?
Probably impossible, because I always like to think about, okay, how can we focus on not what we cannot do, but what we can do? So
Mhm.
I like to know what we can do, how we can move forward, what action we can take.
It's amazing how many entrepreneurs their least favorite word is either impossible or can't or
Yeah.
no.
Oh
Any
yeah.
of those three words, and you're just like, that's an entrepreneur. Can't take no for an answer. Number three in life, what gets you excited or what turns you on?
I would say a conversation with a passionate person, someone who's really engaged with what they do and believes in what they do. I always leave a conversation like that feeling energized.
What about what turns you off?
Mm, probably situations, we've obviously talked about it, but where there are, challenges that somebody is facing who, especially when it comes to children, that do not necessarily need to be that way.
Mm.
That's what makes me feel off.
What sound do you love?
Music.
A fairly
Anything.
obvious one.
Yes. Life would be so boring without music and laughter, I think.
What sound do you hate?
Mm. You know that sound when like screeching like tires, or just that kind
Mhm.
of screeching. I'm not particularly fond of that sound.
If you could have any one superpower, what would you pick and why?
It would likely be the ability to teleport,
Mhm.
because I love to spend time with different people, different cultures, to learn from different environments, and that would make life a lot easier.
Also make it a lot easier for your luggage. You can just,
Exactly.
click it over to the other side of the world. What job would you most like to attempt?
Oh, um, that's a really good question. What job would I most like to attempt? Probably something, in the kind of humanitarian space. Not entirely sure what that would look like, but kind of moving more into that side of things, or maybe diplomacy. I think that would be really interesting.
What job would you definitely not like to attempt?
Oh, probably an accountant, because I just I'm a creative person through and through, and sometimes, I mean, of course, I can sit and look at numbers, but it's not my my favorite activity. So that would probably be what I would say.
Final question. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I would like him to say that, one, welcome, and two, you used all of the gifts I gave you in the best way that you possibly could.
Beautiful. I think we'd all be glad to hear that.
Yes.
Well, Hannah Kathleen, it's been a pleasure. There are certainly a lot of other things I feel like I could discuss with you, but let's leave it there for round one, shall we say. Thank you so much for your time jumping on, and best of luck over in Japan.
I should say arigato. Thank you. I attempted something there. No, but thank you so much, Adrian, and also everything that you shared about how you even came to set up doing these interviews is very inspiring. And I think that bringing everybody together in the way that you do is very admirable. So thank you for
Thank you.
having me, and thank you for doing what you do.
It's been a pleasure. I will keep you on the line for just a sec whilst I hang up with the audience. But thanks to everyone for watching, and we will speak to you next time. Bye
Thank
for now.
you.